Hello, I'm Toycat, and here's a fun question from Reddit. Are the US and Canada the two most similar countries in the world, or are there two countries even more similar? There is an objective answer to this question, and this map shows you that the UAE and Qatar are the two most similar countries in the world, followed by Burundi and Rwanda, and then Czechia and Slovakia. And this kind of makes sense. These two countries came out of the same country, same with these two, and these two are looking to merge into a greater East African Federation, so logically they must all be basically the same. Except this raises the weird question of how can this be objectively true? And the answer is that this is Objectiveless, a website that tries to work out the objective way to measure countries against each other, but there is also obviously the subjective way, and is that any better, or is that just substantially worse, or is there perhaps a better blended approach that we should use? Well, this is the weird world that I dove into after this map drove me insane, because it seems so close to right, but also very janky that you can come up with some objective score that isn't explained anywhere. It just says demographics are 20%, culture is 20%, government is 20%, infrastructure is 20%, and then geography is the last 20. And indeed, they have this website to back it up, but the website then has this weird AI narrated video.
Our world has many unique countries.
It just feels
However,
so wrong. I don't know how to describe it, but so it made me really question the faith and everything else. But yeah, basically they have some objective list that they don't describe to you. They just say that it comes up at 88.7, and that logically they're very similar because the majority of their citizens are Sunni Muslims, and they've got oil and gas reserves and 100% access to electricity and water. And it's like, no, you can't say that countries are similar because of facts like this. It just doesn't feel right to me that the standard gauge railroad tracks is a way you can compare countries, but it is a way that they've decided that these are the two most similar in the world. It's the right answer, but it feels like they must have got there in the wrong way. This is something which I feel like is important to at least question every now and then, like something that seems right to you and that you would just immediately look at and say, is that true? Is something you have to question as to why it came about that way, and that's why I think this website is so fun, because it's a whole website dedicated to telling you where countries are similar to one another. So for example, you can select my country, I live here, so I happen to know what is similar to the kingdom that is united, and you can see that looking at this map that different countries are more or less similar to the UK, with the least similar places being those just in sub-Saharan Africa and indeed right in the middle of the stands, and the most similar places being those in Europe or the Anglosphere. This entirely backs up my preconceptions of what is similar to the UK, because when I visit Europe I feel somewhat at home, and when I visit anywhere in the Anglosphere I feel extra at home in a way that is hard to describe. And so indeed, they say the 10 most countries similar to the UK are Ireland, the Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, and New Zealand. But this is where I say, well, this is a weird one, right? Because although New Zealand is not very similar in geography, it's literally on the other side of the map here, it's very similar in terms of the people, and it's the closest thing you can get to the UK flipped to the other side of the world, whereas the Netherlands does all sorts of weird things that aren't true there, and indeed, so does Denmark, you could argue too. I think that this is, again, I think it's a bit wonky, especially because I would have to argue that if we talk about Ireland, a country which has basically the same map as the UK, but seems to have slightly fewer links to most of the non-European countries, and really much closer links to the UK than anything else, you can see that they argue that the UK and Ireland are the most similar countries because Ireland, but then they also talk about big differences. They're like, well, the United Kingdom was ruled over Ireland, and they have similar demographics, culture, technology, but the biggest difference between Ireland and the United Kingdom is religion. Ireland is Catholic and more religious in general. Another difference is Ireland's part of the European Union and still uses the euro, and it's like, well, that's a weird way to describe the most similar country. By the way, if you're curious, the least similar country in the world to Ireland is Eritrea, which is just a funny thing to dive into. Like, if you're trying to objectively work out the least similar country, so let's pick a fun one, Egypt. What is the least similar place in the world to Egypt? The answer is Japan. And that doesn't feel correct to me. I mean, I kind of see it. Like, I feel like Japan's a very safe country, and Egypt's one where every time someone recommends you go there, they're like, yeah, make sure you have an armed transport if you want to go between the cities. And you could also argue they're far apart, but it doesn't feel like they're the most unsimilar countries. Indeed, maybe we should go check out Japan. Is Japan's least similar country Egypt too? Because if it's not that way, oh, it's not. Yeah, you can see it's a link that you can go down endlessly and conclude that Niger and Japan are the two least similar countries in the world. Wait, is that true? the two least similar countries in the world. Whoa, that is. And you see what I'm saying here? Like, this doesn't feel like this can be truly objective in any meaningful way, because they don't really explain what they just say they weight it 2020, but they don't say how they come about that. They say it's an objective list managed by Jeff M. Jones, and I'm sure that he's a very smart guy that knows what he's talking about, but I think that they're hiding their subjectivity when measuring countries behind something that is much more, behind something that looks like it's objective on the surface. And so if you're going to be going by vibes and then facts that vaguely back up those vibes, would you not be better suited by saying, okay, what countries do European countries in particular, because that's where I have the most experience and can back this up, and Americans consider to be most similar to their own? If this list says that if you're from, let's just pick a country. If you're from Germany, objectively, your most similar country, again, purely objectively, no subjectivity to this, your most similar countries are Austria, Denmark, or the Netherlands, depending on which way you go around. And obviously, Austria being number one actually makes perfect sense to me based on having visited both. But yeah, if we then say that these are the three most similar by objective list, how does that look on the subjective list? How do people feel? Which countries are the most similar to Germans? Well, as we can see, Austria, the Netherlands, but then instead of Denmark, which I think was the third choice, yeah, on the other way, instead of Denmark being third, or Switzerland, or Belgium, or indeed, you can see France is number 6 right here, it seems as though Germans would say that French people are actually the third most common country. Something that is very weird, because if you ever, French people and Germans have like one of the most dysfunctional relationships of any states or peoples in the world. They have a history of trying to invade each other, indeed. That's a large part of, really, that's the biggest part of like successful European policy is like, can you get France and Germany to stop invading each other? It doesn't matter how many other flaws you create in the process or like, issues with currencies or debt. If you stop the two countries invading each other, you get a successful continent. I would say that is the largest way you could describe Europe. And so the fact that they are so similar despite that is kind of funny, right? And also kind of funny is if you look at most European countries, they say that their most similar country is like, yeah, it's somewhere else in Europe right next door, but the United Kingdom is different because we have all of these other countries, I mean, obviously outside of Ireland, which are on other continents that fit that bill, whereas Germans don't say they're anything like Australians or Canadians. Swedes say that they're like Canadians, like, the 7th or 8th line over here. Sweden's people are more like Austrians than they are like Australians, I guess. And I think it's just really, really interesting once you start diving into this and realize like, oh yeah, the UK has this like slightly odd spot in Europe. It's something I make a point of every time in these videos, that unlike most other European countries where all of the, again, like people talk about why would the UK leave the EU? I don't understand how you can think there's more of a future trading outside of Europe than inside of it. It's all of your closest friends, except not quite for the UK, right? It's the UK is a bit of an oddball in a lot of ways there. But anyway, so this is a really fun list in my opinion, shows you which countries people think most similar. But what I love that YouGov did, it's the big polling site in the UK, is they then decided to compare these lists, and they've got this wonderful huge thing where you can see which countries people think are least similar to themselves. So the lowest I could find on a cursory glance was that Icelandic people and New Zealandish people, and indeed the Finns, all think that Italy is the least similar place to them. Only 13% of people think it's similar, and only 17% of Canadians. I think that therefore implies that weather is a big factor. Again, you need a little bit of culture in there too, but weather is a huge factor in how people see that, because the same is true for Spain. And then I found something which was even more fun than this, because taking countries and seeing what they think about each other, even really far apart countries, like, do Russians think they're like the UK? Nope. Do Russians think they're like anyone? Maybe the USA, sort of. Also, this is the new lowest ranking I've seen now. Is there anyone lower? Afghanistani people think that they are sort of like the UK 1% of the time. And again, sort of like the USA a lot. Indeed, you can see the USA has the highest ranking for most of the countries here that aren't in Europe. But then in Europe, everyone has a European country they're best friends with. We're a super cliquey club of countries, I guess. Or they are, because the UK is obviously a whole different game here. And I think this is hugely interesting. But then I love that they did this. Which of the countries' perceptions of similarity are most unrequited? I love that they decided to do this. So in other words, Swedish people think that they are less like Danish people than Danish people think that they are like Swedish. So 86% of Danes think that they are similar to Sweden, and only 82% of Swedes think they're similar to Denmark. that's a 4% gap. But in the case of Italy and Spain, it is a way bigger gap because Italians are less likely to say they're like Spanish than Spanish people are of Italians. And the biggest gaps like that are Germans and Danes and Italians and Swedish people. Why do Swedish people think they're Italian? And indeed, you can see that one of the most fascinating bits here is that there is that big gap between these countries and Britain than anywhere else. The UK sort of sees ourselves like Germany, but Germany's like, yeah, that's the UK. They're kind of weird over there. The UK sort of sees themselves like France, but France is like, non. See, look at that. I did French. I feel disgusted myself. Anyway, that's a fun joke. French is a very fun language that's used in all sorts of countries around the world and France. But the important point, the interesting thing here is that Spain and Britain, Italy and Britain, there's a big gulf between Britain and most countries, but the same is true of the USA. The USA has this kind of grabbing a bunch of bits from countries and feeling like it's similar to all of them, but other countries don't feel like the USA as much as the USA does with them. In fact, let's go to... is the USA on here? Yeah, the USA feels like pretty close to all of these countries, and I think that's a hugely interesting thing. Oh wait, no, the USA, yeah, the USA feels very close to all of these countries, but then if we ask all of those countries about the USA, the UK is like, oh, the GB. I don't know why, it's a bit of a weird one. They've got UK and then GB up there. But as you can see, we've got the USA and, like Great Britain sort of got a shared relationship. Everyone else is like, yeah, there's some weird fellas over there that we cooperate with on defense and trade for some reason. Anyway, I think that's really interesting. But finally, we've got one last thing that I wanted to go through, which is that this is not correct, right? This is feelings and vibes, and the unrequited nature sort of breaks things. But also, again, I haven't seen anything that makes me love this, or anything that really makes me hate it. I've just seen a bunch of stats that look like they mean something and that I want to believe have some great meaning to them, so it's exciting, but I don't really know. And so that is what made me find this map, because I wanted to find someone else's perspective. And so this is Visual Capitalist. They're very good with data, or at least they're very good at sharing lots of data. And they asked people in 94 countries how important family, friends, work, leisure, politics, and religion were in their life. Every single country in the world decided family was the most important, so that's clearly a human characteristic and not a nationalist one. But then the second most important is what the bubbles represent. So red would be friends, yellow is leisure, green is religion, and blue is work. And as you can see, very few countries pick leisure. I think it's literally 5 that I can spot on this list. And then it's really kind of a debate about what's more important in your life, your religion. Intriguingly enough, religion is exclusively, as best as I can tell right here, besides maybe Nigeria, as best as I can tell right here, is exclusively an Islamic thing to say it's just as important, or rather more important than anything besides family. Whereas in the countries, which I would say form a similar club, the UK is close to the Scandinavian countries and close to the US and close to the Anglosphere, is that the second most valuable thing is friends. Is there something about a society that is more important than, again, like just to really kind of come back to this one, the reason that like Ireland and the UK are not fully similar as you might expect. So it says right here that unlike Ireland, which has a unusual railroad track gauge, the UK and Denmark share one. I don't think that makes us more similar countries than Ireland, by the way. But I think that rather than saying that railroad track is the thing that defines bonds and either is your opinions, what if it's the things that you value? And indeed, in a lot of countries in the Western world where we all feel like we get along, and I think there's this funny joke about in countries where good things are happening, countries where you care if a tragedy happens are called collectively the West. But the thing that actually ties most of them together is maybe this value in empowering yourself and your friends and your family first, and then society is second, versus some countries view society as second, and then you get your family and your friend bonds from that. Something which can be, or not your family, but your friend bonds at least. And the same is true of work. If you value work more than you value friends, if you value work more than you value leisure, you can get a really weird mixture of things. And my point here is that there are lots of things that are valuable in the world, but it seems as though you can kind of min-max for religion on the one end over here. You can see religion gets pretty important for friendship, or you can min-max for work, and it seems to create this weird spectrum of countries that actually do get similar to each other, with only a few exceptions where you're like, yeah, South Africa and Thailand, I don't know that I would say they're incredibly similar. But I guess I should check objectively before we leave this video, because what is my conclusion? My conclusion is that after looking up every single way that you can try to measure if countries are close together, there isn't an objective way, but every way that seems objective gets pretty close on the vibes. And are the vibes the really important thing? Also, wow, look at South Africa's map of the world. No one is similar to South Africa. They've got 3 neighbors, and then it just drops off the map entirely. And also, the least similar country to South Africa is North Korea. They have obvious political differences. I don't spot any obvious political differences. Am I right? Cogent, coherent political commentary right there. Anyway, so North Korea has strict gun control and drug laws in contrast to South Africa. In addition, while college is free in North Korea, in South Africa, many students pay fees for primary school. Yeah, you know, when I said that South Africa had a very different system that I couldn't actually spot, that was me being rude to North Korea's functional system, apparently. Anyway, so yeah, it's very, very, very interesting in lots of ways how you can measure countries, and the more you dive into it, the more you realize that the thing that really links us is being humans. And, I don't know, having governments that steep things... Because what is it that makes someone from... this is the bit that really gets me. It's like someone from Northern Ireland is much more similar to someone from Ireland, for obvious reasons. And someone from Kent is much more similar to someone from France. And so, already to aggregate, you have to aggregate a lot of things together. And so there's no such thing as an objective way to measure things besides saying, are they close culturally and are they close geographically? You know, like literally on a person by person or area by area level. And then if the whole country it matches, then that's good. And then you throw a bit of history in there for good luck. And I think you've probably got it much more than you would with plug sockets. But are plug sockets actually the secret thing that tie us all together? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Because I would say that, yeah, geography, it's obviously my bias from this channel, but I would say geography, history, and a little bit of culture are what actually keep us together within our countries. But is there something greater that means that even though the people in this region of France are actually very, you know, like, are actually much closer to Paris and much closer to France than they are elsewhere, is there a reason that keeps the Shetland Islands much closer to the UK and London or Edinburgh than they are to Norway, despite that being geographically untrue? Is there something magical about countries, or do countries actually have to shape to reflect the people of the views of the people inside of it? That's your question for today. All I know is I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. I'm pretty busy this week. I've got some people who are visiting me, and I hope that if you're watching this, then that's a sign that I'm out having fun in the real world in old Nebworth. I could be here right now. Yeah, look at me. This is where I'm at right now. Much better than being inside talking about countries and their similarities. You know, I'm bad at ending things here, but what are the most similar states, do you think? I wonder what the most similar state to Nevada is. Actually, wait, what? Let's go food similarity. What food is most similar to United Kingdom food? Oh, we don't have it? Or unless it's under B. British food? Yeah. British food is most similar. Hey, we got a little bit of Russia and a little bit of Chile on here. Oh, that's fun. Anyway, this is a fun website. I could spend all day browsing it, but I'm not sure that I would learn too much from it. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is the only true way to see the world. Huh. Yeah. Looks informative enough to me. Anyway, thank you for watching. Second channel, don't care. Bye.